Hey, thank you so much for joining my YouTube channel. Totally stoked. Of course, I want you to subscribe because seriously, why wouldn't you? I can't think of a good reason. Maybe the jokes. It's a little shady. I get it. But I have my good friend Shaun Tabatt with me today. Thank you, Shaun. Super stoked to have you. This is like a role reversal for you, huh?
Yeah, it feels a little weird to be interviewed, but always a joy to spend time with you, Sarah. Excited to see where our conversation goes today.
Yeah, me too. You texted me last night. You're like, what are we doing? I'm like, well, we'll just chat. It's good. So, Shaun, little background. Tell us, like, where you're from, what kind of stuff you do, and a little bit as well as your family.
Sure. Live in Central Illinois. Been there for about 2 years. My brother-in-law is a pastor at a Vineyard Church out there. Your fan base knows who my brother-in-law Putty is. Have a pretty large family. My wife and I are blessed with 10 children. They range from 22 down to 10 months.
10 children. Notice the hair.
Yes. I used to have beautiful hair early on, and it's all been gone since. Work in the publishing industry. Do a range of things from marketing to acquisitions to content creation. I've been a big part of the Christian podcasting space for almost a decade now. I like to think I'm one of the OG podcasters. I'm not sure. Somebody else probably has to give me that designation yet, but that's how I see myself. And yeah, I just love serving in the Christian book space and helping spread good messages.
And what initially got you interested in all that stuff?
I've always loved books since I was a kid, but the big thing probably was because God has a sense of humor. I ended up working at this Christian bookstore, and I was saved at the time, but I just fell in love with the industry. That's also where I met my wife, and so that probably gives me warm fuzzies for my bookstore experience. I took a weird turn, and I went into tech and software for about a decade, but maybe prophetically even, I said at one point in my 20s, like, when I get into my mid-30s, I'm going to go do something in Christian publishing. And I just hit a point in my software career. I was like, I don't really like doing this anymore. And so I just left that behind and rebuilt my career working in the Christian publishing space. And so I've worked for three different publishers over the last 10 years.
And in terms of working in the publishing space, because some of the people who watch are authors or want to be authors, you have some suggestions on working in that industry?
I think the big thing is you have to have a passion for it. I've met a lot of people who are like, well, I got an English degree, therefore I should work in publishing because I want to be an editor someday. And that's fine. If that's your career path, that's great, go for it. But the big thing is you have to be passionate about people and their messages, passionate about the audiences that you're serving. And so for the people where it's that marrying of their passion and calling with the industry they're in, then something magical happens. And so when I meet those people that I can tell they're in it for the long haul, and this is where God has brought them. And that's how I feel about my place in the industry, too, is like, I'll probably be doing this for the next 30 years.
That's totally cool. The other thing I want to ask you about, so you have 10 kids. You said from 22 down to 2 years?
Yep. No, 10 months.
10 months. Titus is 10 months, and he's cute.
Very
oh, my
cute.
gosh, he's super cute. So here's my question. You grew up basically as an only child.
Yep.
And you have now 10 kids. So that seems like a little bit of a, extremes. Why?
Well, I actually, my parents were never married, so I grew up in a single-parent home with only my mom. My dad and I, by God's grace, did reconnect and reconcile later in life, but I never had a father in the home or anything like that. I was blessed with some great families who mentored me when I was junior high, kind of high school age, so I got to see how a normal family operates, but honestly, I've had to learn a lot on the fly. My wife and I had a vision for 6 kids when we got married. I mean, when I first met her, she's like, I want to be a stay-at-home mom, and I want to homeschool, and I want 6 kids, and I was in love, so I'm like, that sounds good to me. And almost 23 years later, here we are with 10 kids. But for us, that was just a passion and a vision for us in terms of just having a vision for a generational legacy. We also come from broken homes, so my wife's parents were divorced, and so we just kind of wanted to be the next generation that sort of breaks the cycle and be the couple that stays together and, be a solid foundation for our kids. Things that basically trying to build the things into our children's life that we didn't have growing up.
And how do you see genuine love? I'm going to ask you in 2 parts. Genuine love, working in publishing industry, and how does that play out for you? And then as well in your family, because those are 2 major themes in your life, I would say, right?
Yeah. Genuine love in the publishing industry. I think if I try to put it in the context of my role, it's trying to work with authors to help to figure out how to bring their message into the market in a way that gets that love of God, the heart of the Father, the expansion of the kingdom out there in a way that's marketable, saleable, makes the author feel like they're being heard. So to some degree, I guess that's how, in terms of spreading the Father's love, I see that sort of as one of my roles behind the scene. And I think, too, to function well in that industry, you just have to have a passion for God's love and his heart for people. Because if all we're doing is selling books and selling products, go work somewhere else. That probably is not a good fit for you. But if you're all about the kingdom and having people experience the love of the Father, well, then that's exactly where you need to be, because that's what that industry is all about.
Yeah. And then how do you see genuine love playing out in the day-to-day context of your family, right?
Well, I work at home, so it's an ever-changing organism day by day. I think in terms of me understanding the heart of the Father, it's grown and shifted over time. So, getting married, I began to understand God's heart in one way, as my wife and I, basically had to learn how to function as a couple, because we didn't have good examples of that growing up. And then, I think I understand more how big God's heart is for all of his children, because it's not like you love any one children any less than the other. If you have 1 or 2 kids, or you have 10 kids, you love each child the same, but also differently, because they bring out a different piece of your character, your spouse's character, and who you are. And as they grow up, you see different parts of you. You're like, oh, that's me. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. And I think in that same way, we get to reflect God's love in that way. We're all kind of different pieces of his heart to reach the world with the kingdom.
One of the things I've watched, and because I've seen you with a couple of your kids over time, and I watch you as a dad with them, and each of them is super distinct. And you don't try to make them into a cookie cutter, and you facilitate, you want to empower whatever's in. And I watch you do that with each of them uniquely. And I think that's really powerful. You empower their identity, and you're like affirming that. And I think that's a really cool way, a very authentic way for love, is to like accept and empower and breathe into that too. So just want to applaud you on that. I watch it, I'm like, take notes.
Well, and that's something I think we had to learn along the way. If we just stopped with our first 2 kids, who were very compliant and, yes, I will do as you say,
sure.
We would have thought we were the best parents in the world. But Amelia, who was a good friend of yours, she kind of broke the mold for us. And we're like, oh, wow, there's something different here. And so as we've had more kids and seen their personalities emerge, and now that we have some that are in adulthood and kind of started out in the world, we see their heart and the things that God built and poured into them, like, oh, that's been a thing since he was 2 or since she was 5. And so being willing to, even though sometimes it's kind of painful, like, oh, do we need to have another show tonight to watch? And yet they're expressing their creativity in the way that God made them. And so as we've had more kids, we're like, we probably should just let this run its course and see what happens. A quick example would be Jeremiah. He's loved films and animation since he was a kid. He was obsessed with VeggieTales and writing scripts and stories. And now he works for Fox News right out of high school, and he's doing that behind the scenes. He's doing his animation, but it's been a passion of his ever since he was basically a toddler. And so it is fun to see those things emerge and to be able to really just kind of pour gas on that fire and see what happens.
I love that, and I think that's a really magnificent expression of genuine love, watching that. So thank you for hanging out, Shaun.
Oh, my pleasure.
We get to have dinner tonight, which is going to be great. And love connecting and talking publishing and just talking family and life. So thank you.
My pleasure.
And of course, want to thank you for subscribing and liking all the stuff that you do. And legitimately, I have probably the best joke. Kind of, right? Because we know my jokes. So here's your joke for today. I always knock on the fridge before I open it, just in case there is a salad dressing. Next week will be way better. Not really. Thanks again.